Thank you everyone for coming today or showing up today. We have Josh and Faye from the Utah Division of Water Resources that are going to be talking to us today, so we appreciate them coming. I will just introduce them real quick and then we will get started. So Faye Rudishauser she is the State of Utah Water Conservation Coordinator. So she works with policy leaders, regulators, trade organizations, and local water agencies to develop and implement successful supply and demand side water efficiency strategies. She coordinates water use research, public information campaigns, community and basin water conservation planning, and state efficiency programs. And after she got her bachelor's degree in plant science at Utah State University, she gained experience in indoor and outdoor water efficiency, working for the Utah Division of Water Resources. She worked at Red Butte Gardens, and she owned her own waterized plant nursery. So she also currently serves as the Utah Water Conservation Forum Vice President. And we've got the other part of the dynamic duo, Josh Palmer. He has a background in public administration, public involvement, conflict resolution, and public relations. He worked for several years as a consultant before joining the Utah Division of Water Resources in 2015. And since joining the division, Josh became the section manager over the water efficiency, education, and engagement section. So Josh loves all things water and is excited about Utah's working together to solve Utah's water challenges. He has an undergrad, not from USU, in public relations and is working on achieving his MPA right now. And if you've ever been offended on social media posts from the Utah Division of Water Resources, it was probably Josh. So I will let them go ahead and get started. If you have any questions throughout the broadcast, just put them in the Q&A and we can get those answered. So over to Josh and Faye. Thank you.
Well, we are really excited to be here to talk about not only what's going on with water conservation in the state of Utah, but also some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we have within the state of Utah as it relates to water conservation. It's going to be very conversational. We'll probably both jump in and out. We want it to be conversational. We really welcome your questions. We'd really like to thank Adria for playing Love Shack to bring us on board. That just, I'm sorry, Mark. We'd like to thank Mark for bringing us on. We did not request that song, but we just think it was very, very appropriate to bring us on to something like that.
So because Adria mentioned who we are, I'll briefly say I'm Faye Rudishauser, the State Water Conservation Coordinator, State of Utah, for those of you who are joining us from another state. I'm Josh Palmer. One of the things you'll notice about me is I kind of talk like a surfer, so I just apologize in advance. I'm just really happy to be here. Okay, so I'd like to start out with telling you a little bit about how water is handled in the state of Utah. Josh and I both work for the Division of Water Resources, which is under the Department of Natural Resources. And our mission is to plan, conserve, develop, and protect Utah's water resources. So there's a lot to talk about in all of those areas, but as it relates to conservation and how we're going to provide water for the future, we look at it with a three-pronged approach. Essentially conservation and efficiency, which involves all the programs listed on the left, education, outreach, incentives, and then also optimization. And why I'm only briefly mentioning these is because we will go into these in more detail later on. So then optimization. So can we reuse water? Can metering, what needs to happen there? We will definitely go into that later. Leak detection or water loss, evaluation, groundwater recharge, and then of course the things that we do to expand Utah's water rights.
So one of the things that as Faye and I have talked about, taking water conservation to the next level. It's something I think that is obsessed about almost. one of the important things for Utah citizens is to really understand what that Utah ethic is as it relates to water conservation. And so we've essentially created the 3 pillars of water conservation in the state of Utah. The first pillar is everyone do your part. I'm sure that you've heard somebody say, you know what, I'm going to start conserving once my neighbor starts conserving, or I'm going to start conserving once City Hall stops watering all of the time. Well, we reject that. We say everybody has to do their best within their realm of influence. And so what other people are doing does not give us an excuse not to conserve, and everybody needs to do their part. Secondly, every step is progress. We try not to separate things too much within tiers, in that, you know, somebody is turning off the water while brushing their teeth. We're not going to go to them, and say, well, that's not worth as much as this. We're going to celebrate that they turn off the water while they brush their teeth, and then we're going to educate them on what they can do more. But we celebrate every step of progress.
And we're really going to celebrate those water-wise landscapers.
Yes.
But we do. We might celebrate every step. We might
celebrate some a little bit more, you know, jubilantly than others, but we do celebrate every step.
And I'll just interject. This second step really came from understanding and hearing from people that sometimes there's a little snobbery around conservation. You know, like, I'm doing more than you, or what you're doing isn't enough. And honestly, it's going to take a collaborative effort on all of our parts, doing all kinds of different things to meet Utah's future water needs.
Yeah, and then the third one is that efficiency is a core Utah ethic. We don't only conserve when we've had a bad snow year. We don't conserve less when we've had a good snow year. We try to be as efficient as possible, because being wasteful is not okay. And so we need to use this precious resource in the best way that we can.
Utahns are thrifty. We know it. Okay, so to talk about some of the challenges that we face here in the state of Utah, and I'm sure these probably aren't unfamiliar to other Western state conservation or anyone involved in water. But Utah is faced with tremendous population growth. That growth is slowed down a little bit, but we still have tremendous growth happening along the Wasatch Front. The Kempsey-Gardner Policy Institute just recently put out a report about that growth, and the trend is not changing. We're still growing. Then if you look at the diagram to the bottom, that's not represented. That is not Utah's precipitation, but I felt that the graph captures how we receive our water supply. So you can see that it is very, it fluctuates from year to year. Some years we can receive, fill our reservoirs and keep them full for 2 years, and then in other years, like the winter we are finishing up with, it's pretty scary out there. So there's that, and then there's also with climate change influencing our precipitation, either in time, we're getting precipitation at a different time, or secondly, maybe it's not snow, it's coming in rain. Those factors are putting a lot of question marks about our future water supply. Then really quickly, we'll go into meters. The fact that we're not completely confident in the measurements that we're taking about the water, and we need to measure more, that's coming into place. But I definitely want to make sure to bring up the environment, and with regards to 2 aspects. So before the population grew on the Wasatch Front, the water that came from the mountains, from the snow melt, would flow down into the Great Salt Lake, because this is a closed basin. And now, with all the population before the Great Salt Lake, we are using that water, and we are consuming more of that water versus sending it down to the lake. And we have seen, I think it's an 11-foot drop since we've moved here, or established here?
Essentially, if there were no people here, they estimate that the lake would be 11 feet higher.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So what we are concerned with that is if the Great Salt Lake becomes a dust bowl, that's bad for air quality, that's bad for the animals and the birds and all the things that use the Great Salt Lake as a habitat, as well as industrial consequences. So I would say those things are on our radar, and if you like the picture in the middle, that's a lot of how the state, that's how we feel most days, trying to figure things out. So to talk a little bit about our track record, so gallons per capita day, I see some states keep track of this, some don't, but I wanted to touch on it. Capita is per people. Sometimes engineers or other firms refer to it as ERC or ERU, I've heard, but anyway, gallons per person used per day. So in 1990, we published that we were at 370, I can barely say it, 370 gallons per person per day. And I would say that 1990 to 2000, that was kind of the beginning of our water conservation efforts and kind of a Western recognition of these things needing to happen. Then you can see in 2010, we were at 241 gallons per person per day. And the question mark from 2015, such a hot topic. We're still having those numbers, we're still working on those numbers, and Josh is going to go into that more, but we'll see. Last slide for Josh gets a chance. I'm going to give him a chance because he's the funny one.
I actually have 2 slides in this entire presentation that she's letting me talk. So I'm just kidding.
That's totally okay, so I'm not going to touch on this one too much because it's from 2010, and I'm looking forward to being able to establish something like this for 2015 once those numbers are finalized. But I just wanted to capture that as we know here in the West, 60% of Utah's water use goes outdoors, and this is in the residential, M&I sector, municipal and industrial, and indoor use is about 40%. Then if you go over to the graph, the pie chart on the left, you can see that out of residential, industrial, commercial, institutional, the different uses. Now, maybe there will be some out there that think about this, but the elephant in the room is also ag. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about where we're at. So one of the things, this presentation is about water conservation, but in order for us to track water conservation, we have to have reliable numbers. And so it's really important that we talk about what's gone on over the last few years. So in 2015, a legislative audit was released that analyzed how water data is both gathered, how it's analyzed, and how things can be better. So as it stands right now, the Utah Division of Water Rights is responsible, and so we're Water Resources. Utah Division of Water Rights is responsible for gathering that data, and then we're responsible for analyzing it, and then trying to track trends and figure out, okay, where are we at as far as our water budget goes? You know, where do we need to conserve more? Those kind of things. And the legislative audit had identified several ways that we needed to be better. And it's something that we took really seriously. And we went piece by piece with the recommendations and worked really hard to make sure that each one of those recommendations was addressed in the best way that we possibly could. In 2017, there was a follow-up to that legislative audit that found that there were a lot of improvements that we made, but they were nice enough to identify even more things that we could do to be better. As a result of that initial audit, we actually suggested that there be a third-party analysis of the 2015 numbers. We do a kind of a deeper dive about every 5 years, and so 2015 was that day. 2015 is that year, and so we had a third party do an analysis of the best that we could get to, and they actually had some really interesting findings, specifically as it related to secondary water. They found that the methodology was pretty solid, but the way that we determined some of the inputs was flawed, and to the point that we were up to 30% off when it came to secondary water use. And so that's something right now that we're implementing into our inputs, into our methodologies, and we're working on releasing those numbers this spring. And so that's important because we want to make sure that these numbers are as accurate as possible. Now, we'll talk a little bit about some of the complications as it relates to secondary water. It found the potable water numbers were actually really good. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to address to make sure that we really know where we're at.
One of the other measures or recommendations that came out of the audit was to establish regional water efficiency goals. So we just actually finished developing the scope of work on this to hire a third-party consultant to help us come up with the regions, come up with the goals. What programs can we run to equal how many acre feet? What are the costs of those projects? And how realistic are they? So I know we're all familiar, or for those of us joining us from Utah that are familiar with from governor to governor, there's been 25% has always been this figure that we talk about. And now we're excited to get down to the local and the community level to personalize these goals and start talking about how realistic they are and what we need to accomplish specifically with conservation.
Yeah, I mean, and Utah's kind of a challenging place as it relates to conservation because we have such different climates. The climate up in Logan is very much different than the climate in St. George. And so to have an analysis by region about what those opportunities are, we think is a really important thing.
We're really excited to have that reality around that and have some actual figures because it is so different, and water systems are all completely different, and communities are completely different, and we want to develop education materials and programs that work for them. So one of the exciting things, another exciting thing that's coming up, I'm trying not to cry. We're working on the backside of this, and so I'm going to say how excited I am, but it's also been a ton of work. But no, we really are excited. In the last couple of years, I would get calls from people and they would say, I want to be able to get a rebate for a smart timer. And I would say, I'm sorry, there's not one available in your area. And gosh, probably for the last 20 years, we would ask the legislature year after year, we would have these great proposals and we would say, we could use money for this and we could use money for that. Well, up until that was zero that we got and we made happen. But then we got somewhere around $2 million. And a significant portion of that is going to go into the statewide rebates to start to increase incentives for people to irrigate correctly. We're going to start with a smart timer rebate. And then we're going to, as we develop the software and the consistency within the programs throughout the state, we'll offer more programs. But we're really excited about that. Our water conservancy districts have been some of our greatest partners. And this just kind of takes off from where they've started, and we will all work together to promote these programs and have things more available to the public.
Yeah, so those people that called and said, I want something, now we're going to be able to point them to a really cool portal that's really easy to use, and we're really excited about it. So, all right. So I hope we have some water geeks that are watching this, because I am so geeked out about secondary water meters. So up until a few years ago, there really wasn't a great meter on the market for secondary water. So for those who are out of state, Utah is kind of unique as it relates to water use, because we use a lot of secondary water. We have untreated water that is delivered in a different infrastructure system, in a different piping system than the water that goes to our houses that's drinkable, than our drinkable water.
Or so canal.
Yeah, so it's a completely separate system. And you know, and it's kind of based in as there's been this ag to urban transfer. That water has been gone from irrigating crops to irrigating people's yards. Well, we recognize that you measure what matters, and measuring that water really mattered. So they finally have a meter on the market that has like a 25-year warranty. And Weber Basin and others have done pilot programs to see what the impact is. Specifically, Weber Basin did a pilot study that showed that when a meter is installed on a secondary water system and it is combined with an educational component, people are conserving sometimes more than 30%. And then communities like Saratoga Springs, who are combining that with a tiered rate system, they're seeing even greater water conservation. So the other thing is it addresses a real challenge, is that right now we have to estimate secondary water use because it's not metered. So as far as knowing what we use even, it's really important that secondary water metering is universal. We're very much in favor of universal secondary water metering. You've probably seen some things in the news that the legislature is really talking about that. There was a bill this year. We think that it's a very good possibility eventually that there will be a deadline for universal secondary water metering. And we think that it's really important for the future of the state to measure this precious resource no matter where it comes from, because it will empower us then to make decisions based on the best data available.
And some of the decisions that Josh is referring to is when we consider large development projects like the Bear River or the Lake Powell pipeline, we have the facts in place. We know what's happening within systems before Utahns can pay for, you know, a $1.5 billion project. So that's the drive for, like, are we making the most conscious choices about our water use and development? So which also leads us to another audit. Audit is such a nasty word, but this is really neat software. We recently just finished a second stage of pilots with systems around Utah that used the AWWA M36 software and worked with engineers from Kavanaugh to do these pilots to see what they thought about these audits and how to dissect their water use, their losses between real loss and apparent loss. So, so far the feedback has been tremendous. In attending the pilots, I learned things about these systems that I just had I mean, the amount of work that goes into running a water system is just phenomenal. And the things that they even discovered about their systems, about their operations, was really neat to watch. And we're excited to have these audits happen throughout the state, throughout all systems on a regular basis.
Hey, Mark, can we get a time check here? Just want to know how we're doing.
Yeah, I think you're good. I'd say another 10 minutes if you want to fill that with the kind of content. There's only one question in Q&A right now, so I don't think.
Okay, thank you very much.
We're both married, so I hope we got that covered. Okay, so water conservation certification, moving quicker. The Division of Water Resources the Division of Drinking Water and Rural Water Association of Utah developed this water conservation certification. We launched it last year, and we are really excited that about what an opportunity it is to bring people together to learn about both supply and demand side conservation efforts. We had speakers from water rights to conservation experts to indoor-outdoor savings, how to write a water conservation plan. It was really neat, and it had a really diverse audience. So we're psyched about this. This will be an annual certification to increase education about the things we can do to promote conservation and in our community.
We've also started a partnership with the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. Water is Your Business is what it's called. One of the things, just kind of as a background, that we've tried to make one of our values is that if we're criticized for something that somebody feels like we should do better, instead of trying to defend, we say, do they have a point? Is there something more that we can do? And we hear a lot that, you know, hey, I see some of these businesses that are wasting and those kind of things. And this opportunity came up, and we really jumped on it, helping them create this program. And we're going to be looking for other opportunities because we think that that institutional water conservation, making that an ethic, having them set that example is really important.
So conservation through all the sectors that I mentioned earlier, M&I sectors, and also it's an opportunity to highlight the great things that businesses are doing, as well as address some of the things that could be better.
So the other thing that we've heard a lot is we have gotten water waste complaints probably ever since we've had a water conservation coordinator, before Faye, before I.
Everyone raise your hand if you've had a complaint about water waste.
So we needed a better mechanism in order to track those things. And so we created Utah Water Use Hall of Fame or shame. Now, we used the shame thing because, not because we're actually shaming people, but because we knew that it would get attention. We actually think that it is it's actually decreasing the shame, and it is more giving the important data, important information that's needed. So people can go to water.utah.gov/fame or shame. They can compliment themselves or someone else, and we pick a monthly winner during the summer that receives a gift card. So they can upload a cool photo of their waterwise landscape or just talk about the things that they do to conserve. That's really what we try to focus on, are those good examples. And then on the other end, for water waste complaints, they have an opportunity to not just swear at their neighbor, but to fill out the details, and then we forward that to the water provider to give them the details that they would need to check it out. And so we've actually got some pretty cool data from that. I'm just going to really push through this really quickly. These are where we've gotten, whether it be fame or shame, these are the areas we've had reports come from. We are tracking what type of water-wise practices are being reported, as well as these are some of the areas that our monthly winners have come from and shown really great examples of water conservation. And then from the waste reports, the complaints, we're tracking what type of complaint is coming in. Is it daytime? Is it too long? And then we're also tracking by geography. We're not tracking people's addresses. We're not, going to people's doors and knocking or anything like that. But this allows us to identify trends, including we might want more compliments coming from certain areas or just more awareness. And when we track it from a geographic standpoint, we're able to say, hey, this area might need to know a little bit more that this tool is available. The only other thing that I would say is that if you combine business, churches, and government complaints, there's more of those complaints than residential. So we actually get a lot of those. There's this desire for these entities to set an example, and that's what we're seeing in the data.
And just to make a quick note, all of that information with regards to shame is absolutely not public information. Yeah. Those graphs are meant to be as ambiguous as possible, so we can go at a high level on what's happening by community, but not pinpoint somebody.
Yeah, it's only at the municipal level. So we know what city it is, and then we can track what type is there. Do you mind? I'm just going to keep going. We also created H2O, Utah's Waterwise Pledge. The winner in 2016, we had a competition among universities. The winner in 2016 was Utah State University. The winner in 2017 was not Utah State University, and we're pretty sure that by that reaction, the reaction we got from Utah State University, that they will be the winners in 2018. H2O, Utah's Waterwise Pledge is found at water.utah.gov/H2O. It is a really quick and easy pledge. The research shows that when people pledge, they're much more likely to actually take action because they feel like it's a promise. And so we've had thousands of people go online. What's great about it is it simultaneously educates and commits people to water conservation. We've had competitions among municipalities, and probably our funnest competition is among universities. It's just been a really fun one, and we'll have you look it up. There's been a lot of media attention around that about how that's all worked.
Slow the Flow. So Slow the Flow is a regional partnership that we have with our Water Conservancy, our largest water providers, traditionally water conservancy districts. And we fund this program together. It's a branding, Slow the Flow, and then a website we just recently updated, and we're just trying to increase the flow of information by having one central location that you can go to for events, tools, rebates, things like that, all across the state. So definitely check out slowtheflow.org.
So we're trying to put as many educational and marketing materials out there, not just for us to use, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but for anybody to be able to use. So if you're a municipality that is on this webinar, let us know if you want some of the Slow the Flow materials. We want water conservation to be talked about at that local level. And so we've actually created a Google Drive that has Slow the Flow materials, other materials that anybody who wants to access them and share those important things, they can access them. Mm-hmm. So we think that's really important.
We don't want community systems to be wasting their time developing materials. There have been a lot of materials developed. There's a lot of resources out there. At that level, we're just looking for people to promote. If there's action groups in the community, people that are concerned about their water, they can use these materials to promote. The water system can use them to report. The local government can use them to report. County government, all the way up, just that everyone using this information together. We have used, also one of the things through Slow the Flow is we have used community partnership to push the conservation message throughout the state. And here you can see some of our partners that we've done work with. More people sharing the conservation message means it goes further. News media is also something that we do through Slow the Flow, as well as division efforts specifically, and Josh will speak to that. But doing interviews with all of our popular TV stations and articles and things like that. And as you can see in the latest on air, cute little tips that say, turn off your sprinkler, save 3,000 gallons.
So another thing that we do is we utilize social media and other mechanisms in order to help people make the good decisions in the in the easiest way possible. One of the things that we produce is the weekly lawn watering guide that uses the evapotranspiration in order to determine what by county what an area should be watering. It's really popular. It really has helped a lot of people understand Maybe the greatest benefit is in early spring. A lot of people don't need to be watering at all, and it's just out of habit that they're charging their systems and they're getting them going, and they're watering 6 days a week. And this really gives them an easy way to make those decisions, kind of takes it out of their realm and just helps make the decision. So we also have conservewater.utah.gov, which is a great resource in partnership with Flow the Flow and other resources. We really try to have fun when it comes to this subject. We think that we can simultaneously educate and entertain. And so with our social media, we try, there are times people share our social media posts and they don't know that they're educating their neighbor. They just share it because it's kind of funny. But they are educating their neighbor, and we try to make it as entertaining as possible because that's really what gets the message out there. One of the things that we socially inappropriate media, right? So one of the things that we started implementing this year, we want to have this ethic where people just love water, that they appreciate snowpack and they understand the link between snowpack and water supply. And we noticed that this is actually a map that's, is produced. You can find it on ksl.com. And we noticed that there have been a lot of people sharing it, a lot of organizations sharing it, and it wasn't getting a whole lot of shares, wasn't getting a whole lot of likes. And so, we at that point, we asked ourselves, how can we make this ridiculous, but also educate and, make it entertaining? And so that's what we've done. The one on the right, it kind of gives an example of how we try not to take ourselves too seriously, but we do take water conservation very seriously. We also have media outreach campaigns. We try to identify different times of the year. What is the biggest bang for our buck that we can get out there? And we try to reach out to the news media, try to help them cover those stories to get that out there. You've probably seen us in interviews and things like that. We're face kind of a big deal. I mean, that's really the point of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
appreciate that. It's just me. Just kidding. We have a great team. So we're ready for questions.
Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for being a big deal too. I really appreciate you guys coming out. It looks like we have a few questions. Some of them were kind of during the, we might have to go back a little bit, but I guess we should start with the question of how did Weber State University win the H2 oath? And was there any funny business involved?
I ran it the first year and USU won, and I'm a USU graduate. I did not run it like this last year.
But it was a U of U graduate who ran it, actually.
Right.
And so,
Just kidding.
The answer is that one university won fair and square and one lost fair and square. And if you want to do best out of three, you're really going to have to show yourselves.
All right, we'll be there next year for that. So,
all right.
Okay, so
we want to see Southern Utah represent.
I have to admit, it does get people pretty excited, and that's probably where we've got most of our Facebook stuff is when we have the H2 oath going on. So it's been a really good program. Back at the first, when you were talking about the gallons per capita per day, can you explain a little bit more about culinary? And I don't know if you've
culinary versus secondary, or the
drinking water is another way to say it. Treated water. I'm not sure if I've identified the question, but treated water. This is the water that's safe to drink. If you look at when I've studied our use, traditionally we used culinary water both indoor and outdoor, and then at a certain point we started shifting to the use of secondary water, perhaps with that ag conversion like Josh mentioned, but people started using secondary systems. The advantage to that is it is cheaper because you don't have to treat the water, and it's all like these canals and things like that. They're already throughout a lot of communities, Utah communities. So that's what's getting used outdoors. And sometimes it's recycled water as well. reuse.
Okay. And related to that, can you comment about how much treated wastewater is currently being used for landscape irrigation, and how much will that increase in the future?
I don't know that I necessarily have that number off of the top of my head.
Could you email that to us, Adria?
Sure, yeah.
And we can follow up with that person?
Yeah.
Yep, I can do that. Let's see, and just a related question that I had that's not on here is, when you were going over the gallons per capita per day, how does that compare to other states? I know in the past we've always been sort of the worst of the worst, but can you kind of just comment on that and explain where we compare?
I'm going to give you the political answer, and I'm going to say we're like the second worst. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Has that changed at all?
We have work to do. Plain and simple. We need to be more efficient. We need to conserve more. And that's going to take everybody working together. That's going to take people with really good ideas putting pressure on us. That's going to take us putting pressure on others. That's going to take everybody working together to make us more efficient. Look, our goal that we've talked about is that we don't want to move from first or second least efficient up to, like, you know, oh, hey, we're only at number 5. We want to be the most efficient. We want water efficiency to be one of those ethics in Utah, and we think that we can get there. And we think that there's a lot of really passionate people that if we work collaboratively with them, that we can make that happen. And we're passionate about that, and we're dedicated to making that happen. But it's going to take everybody, and it's going to take the resources that are necessary in order to get there.
And one of the things that I didn't point out about that gallons per capita day, you know, start where we started in 1990 versus where we are now in 2015, there is a progression down. We are reducing our use. There just is a lot more to be done. Some areas it could be as much as 50%. Some areas it could be as low as 5%. And every day we're just getting better and better at identifying where we could be more efficient, where we can conserve, as the first step in our plan for water.
And just one more thing, and that's going to be the strength of that third-party analysis that is going to come up with those regional water conservation goals, because they're going to take that region's weather, their ET, a lot of different things into consideration when they talk about that, and that we're going to be able to utilize that in our efforts.
And one of the conversations we're starting to try to shift is, we have always looked at water as a perspective of people are using this, so we need this much water. And we're kind of trying to flip that conversation now to, we know, I mean, there's so much data out there now. We know what you need. And so now what's possible? Like, we are able to get closer to identifying levels of waste, you know, and that, you know, runs the gamut. But
okay, yeah, thanks for that. There's been a couple of questions about the fame and shame. Let's see. So Hillary asks, how to get local Chamber of Commerce on board for that? And then Megan asked, for the fame or shame program, can you provide some fame examples, and how many entries are there typically for each monthly drawing?
Oh, great. So let's start with Chambers of Commerce. So what we did, we actually did, it was more of a media relations for the first year of outreach. It actually got a lot of coverage for the tools availability. But I think that's a great idea. We haven't reached out specifically to a specific Chamber of Commerce. We've more done that outreach via presentations, via media relations, via social media. But we have had Chambers of Commerce share that the tool is available. So we know that they are aware of it, but it's been kind of the secondary thing. I think reaching out specifically to Chambers of Commerce and letting them know that that's available is a great idea. And so that's something that we could implement. We think this spring's going to be crazy. when it comes to that tool, because we're coming off of drought year. And I think people are going to be really passionate about efficiency. So yeah, that's a great idea. And whoever asked about that, if you have any other ideas, we will definitely implement them. As it relates to FAME, the good examples, we had, I believe it was 160 FAME submissions just last summer. Many of them had pictures of landscapes. Some of them were, just talking about, hey, I never waste a cup of water. I water my plants. We meet every month and we analyze those things and say, what's the best example this month? We get a different level of entries early and late in the season, and then kind of in the middle of the season, I think people are vacationing or on the beach or whatever, and we don't get as many submissions. So, but it was about 160 submissions last summer.
And we didn't do much to promote it. We got, of course, we got attention when you started talking about shame, but I would say we feel that we could do better at publicizing. If you have a FAME submission, you have a chance at winning a gift card.
Yeah, we use social media extensively and even boosted it and those kind of things to promote it last year. But yeah, we definitely think we could get the word out better.
All right. We've got a couple more questions, but I think they've already been answered. If anyone else has any questions, send them along. I just had one question while we're seeing if there's any final ones. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the rebate programs that you're offering. Do you do those on your own, or are you working with conservation districts for that, or?
So we have this pool of money that we were appropriated by the legislature, and we went through several ideas of how to distribute this amount of funds because of staffing concerns and wanting it to be equal and fair to everyone, that everyone's communities felt like they were getting a portion of the money. And what we decided on was a third-party distribution system. I got the idea out of looking at California's example. And then we started to go down that avenue of developing a website and a portal and how we would push these programs and how we would send out checks and things like that. And lo and behold, Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District had already developed Utah Water Savers. Now this was originally developed to be to run the programs in their service area, and they have been working tirelessly to develop it to provide rebates to the entire state. And how that will be managed is the conservancy districts will manage the rebates in their areas, and then the state will fund a portion of those.
But it will all go through a centralized portal. So people, no matter where you live in Utah, you can go to once it's ready. It's not quite ready yet, but people will be able to go to Utah Water Savers, and they will be able to redeem a rebate. And
you type in your address.
Yeah. And then you can upload you'll be able to upload the receipt. It'll walk you through it, like TurboTax, it's very, very easy to use. And then they'll cut a check based on where you live, and the state ends up emailing that out.
Perfect. Okay. We've got a couple more questions here. Megan asked, have you found any evidence of the word shame discourages people from reporting water waste?
We've, not really. So we, I'm trying to recall the number. It was widely used. And here's the thing. We use it as not necessarily shame on you. We more use it as what a shame. And once people understand that we do not put out on social media, we do not put anybody's name out there, we've actually noticed that there's been less shaming. Because what happened before is you didn't have a good mechanism for administering this. And so people would get frustrated, and they'd take a picture of Utah State's campus maybe, or U of U's campus maybe, or whatever, and they would just tweet it out. Now that's much more shameful than what this tool is. And so what we found is if you're actually shaming, then yes, there's data to support that people will just get discouraged. But once people get into this tool, they understand that we don't even allow people to upload the photo of the shame for privacy reasons. We don't release the personal information out to anybody. All we do is hand it to the local water provider and let them know that there could be an issue in that area, which is something that we had been doing over the phone anyway. And so if we were actually shaming, yes, it would have a negative impact because people would feel called out. But we've actually found that the result is that there's less shaming via social media because there's a responsible mechanism for people to report. And that's our interest. And the other interest is the data, that we can track the trends over time and we can, see what is the balance. We want the balance between complaint and compliment to go towards compliment. And so we hold ourselves accountable to, we need to advertise better in this region or that region, but it's really from a data analytics standpoint very beneficial.
Okay, sounds good. And I bet people just knowing it's there, it maybe motivates them a little bit to think that somebody could look at it too.
And let me tell you, some of the people that may be wanting to shame, we found that half of the people who go into the tool to report don't finish and submit.
Oh, okay.
Because what they do is they get angry and then they go in and they realize, oh, I have to give actually useful information and I'm going to have to click some things and I'm going to have to identify what kind of water waste it actually is. And they just exit out. And so, we feel like the people who are actually doing this are taking the time to really think this thing through, and you're having to use a different part of your brain when you're answering those questions. You're not in fight or flight anymore because you have to analyze what kind of water waste it is. And so the people who are just driven by anger, a lot of times I don't think they finish it. It's the people who are like, this is an issue that needs to be addressed.
And it's a legitimate complaint.
Yeah.
So they're positive that it is water waste, because sometimes things can be happening and it's a function of the system. Water is only delivered at a certain time, so they have to water during the day, or some other things outside of this person's or entity's control. So taking the time to make sure it's a legitimate complaint.
One of the municipalities we work with in order to finalize the questions, just to make sure that we had this right, said that one of the benefits to it from a municipal and water provider standpoint is sometimes they'll go to higher ups and they'll say, look, there's a real issue at this one place, and it was a grocery store in this circumstance that just waste water all the time. And the fact that we're able to deliver those reports, and they had something that was not just, hey, I got this call, hey, I got another call. They had reports that really identified it. It empowered them to have that conversation and then help that entity do better. No, we're not about punching people in the head on these things. We're about identifying where there's an issue and then empowering them to be better.
Sounds good. Thank you. I think we've just got one more question. David asks, Faye, you mentioned that I'm just going to read it so I don't mess it up here. Faye mentioned that they knew what we needed. What does that mean?
I'm just going to say what part of it was in. I think that was in the kind of the third-party analysis portion when we're talking about identifying by region what is needed. So as far as it's not about us saying, hey, we know your region better than you do. That's not what it is. It was within the context of that third-party analysis, allowing us to understand what level of conservation is needed in a certain area. That was my recollection of it, Faye.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch when that question came up, so I think that's probably about the right time. So does anybody have any more questions? I think we're getting to the end of our time here. If you do, you've got 5 seconds to get a question in. Otherwise, I just wanted to say thank you to Josh and Faye for for chatting with us today. And we will have this recorded on our CWEL webinar page, so at cwel.usu.edu/webinars. And then we also have our schedule of the next few webinars coming up. Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this, you guys. We think it's very helpful.
And if you have any ideas for us, let us know. We have open ears, and we accept great ideas from anywhere.
Okay.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.